The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planner Podcast, brought to you by Church Planner Magazine.
Hey, Church Planner, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And this is the first time we've done a podcast the day it's being released. Usually we do it a few days before we record. And then we release on Monday.
That's right. It's almost
But you're
live.
late. You're late by a few days.
I am.
Pete, I'm going to be a little bit late. Can you hold on for 4 days? 4.5?
Yeah, totally, man. So,
what's going on? What's new?
Wow. Oh, man. I'm still in the thick of it. As you can see from all the stuff behind me, that's not even half. Like, you're looking at the good half. Let's put it this way. Everything on the other side of me is like a hurricane here. So, yeah. Starting to get books on shelves, which is good. And I realized that I built for myself about half of what I need to house what I have left of my library, which means my library is cut in half again. But this time I decided, rather than loading people like Reuben Young up, literally the last time I cleansed my library, he left with some of the best books. I mean, his wheels were almost touching the wheel wells. It was like his entire backseat and trunk were filled with books.
You know what he did with that, right?
Sold them?
eBay.
Nice. Well done.
He's a thinker.
I'm somewhat ashamed of myself for getting taken like that.
Well, it's your spirit. You're a giving kind of guy.
I am. And, but, I was like, dude, these will set you up. And someone did that for me. There was a guy that used to, he was a Methodist circuit preacher in Wales. And he was like, hey, come over to my library. You can take 50 volumes of your choice out of my library, which that's legit. When a dude does that, and that was the first time someone did it. The second time was my mentor, Lloyd Jones's protege, Peter Jeffrey, who then did the same, and I got some incredible stuff.
Didn't we have Peter Jeffrey on the podcast?
No, because did we? We didn't interview him. I don't think that
was it. Just material that we had from him.
Yeah, we had an interview. I did a 3-part interview, which is freaking amazing. With him early on. I still lived in Wales. That was one of the last things I did before I left to Wales because I knew he was going to die. So I was like, well, I better hurry up.
Hey, you got to remind me, man. I got a story to tell you off the podcast about a guy I know who goes or went to somebody's church. I don't want to say their name, which is why I want to tell it to you offline.
Okay.
But it's an interesting story. I mean, it's a church planner. Very famous church planner.
Oh,
that you and I have discussed many a time.
Oh, I know who you got.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Hey, here you go. Maybe now you'll know. He's in Arizona now.
I don't know.
Was in Washington.
Washington State?
Was in Washington State.
Oh.
Come on, you know.
I don't know.
But anyway, no, it's an interesting story. It's really interesting.
And we can't tell it on the podcast?
No, because I don't want to be, telling.
Oh, I got you. I got you. Hearsay and stuff.
Well, yeah.
That little thing called integrity. I got you.
But this is from a guy who
said Pete Mitchell hasn't changed in the last 10 years.
Dude, I've changed. I don't know for the better.
So have I, unfortunately, but for the worst.
Dude, I'm telling you, like when you said, I felt God was telling me I needed to call through that list. And you were the first person I called and the last person I called. And I said to you, are you sure it was God who wanted you to call through the list? I'm just saying, maybe there was something else at work.
No, definitely not, man. It was a Lord. I knew it unmistakably. God was like, okay, that was the guy you're supposed to call.
But Friday's the big day for me. Friday's the day I got scheduled for the tattoo.
Yeah. this. And you're getting that verse that you shared me?
I'm getting that verse. I was thinking about getting the nun on the other arm, but
really?
I haven't.
So tell me, I see that all the time. Tell me the significance of that.
That's the letter nun in Arabic for Nazarene, and that's what ISIS was putting on all the Christian homes. Like the Christians
I was
live
thinking
here.
NONE, like you're a nun. You have no religious affiliation now. You're one of the nuns.
Thank you. I do the Church Planner podcast. I have no religious affiliation.
Church zero, none, not. I mean, these are all, synonyms. I figure you just really like my book.
No, that was where ISIS was putting the mark on their homes and basically saying, you're going to convert or we're going to kill you.
Wow.
And then even if they did convert, they'd kill them. So, I mean.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they didn't care.
One-way ticket to Allah?
Yeah, pretty much. So that's why you see it everywhere, because people are like trying to stand in solidarity with the persecuted church. And it's a conversation starter. Like I was telling Dan about it after our podcast this morning, and he's got that on like one of his training helmets or something like that. And he goes, sometimes it leads to gospel conversations because everyone's like, why is this white guy wearing a Arabic symbol?
Well, it's funny you mention this because I thought I was going to be a missionary to the Muslim world at one stage. So I wanted Jesus in Arabic tattooed. And I was like, well, if I go to the Middle East and put that on, I'm a dead man. So I better not do that. So for missionary purposes, I decided not to do it. But yeah, that's good. So you can kiss your missionary days to the Middle East goodbye, Pete.
Not necessarily. See, they got these things called sleeves, and I could just cover it up.
Oh, yes.
Because trust me, this redhead would be decked out in full long clothes, hats. I would be the guy with, the robe that went all the way past his fingers. And yeah.
So it's funny. I just saw you and I were talking about the film Nobody, which I'm hoping to watch in the next couple of days. And,
I want to buy it. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, can you rent it now? Online?
I don't know.
So I gotta check that out. But anyways, I saw an article pop up today that was like the toxic masculinity of Nobody and showed all these action films. And I was just thinking, how ironic, like the disconnect that people have between, the fact that we just celebrated Memorial Day, right? Like for people that gave their lives in toxic masculinity, right? What some might call toxic masculinity, others might call that's kind of being a soldier, And I'm tripping out over the way that the narrative in the last probably 3-4 years is changing so drastically that this has been a move to really get rid of any sense men are under attack. If it's masculine, toxic masculinity to me is predating on women, abusing women. Yeah. To me, that's toxic masculinity. But something that, MMA, it's not toxic masculinity. Things that dudes like, just being a dude, like being a soldier. I come from a military family. It's not toxic masculinity, So, I mean, it's weird, man. So that made me think of you this morning because I know you love that film.
Because I'm toxic masculinity.
Toxic male, yes. As a toxic male.
I am toxic. There's no doubt about it. But that's a good movie. I enjoyed it.
Man. Cool.
Anything new happening? See, it's an afternoon podcast. It's not going to be as lively as our morning ones.
Oh, that's true, huh? That's true. What's going on? Well, so my family has been venturing forth into public with me. And I'm wearing the ninja pants, which at church I got asked because I worked.
Do you wear it with the G.I. Joe shirt?
The G.I. Joe? Oh, no, I haven't.
What are you thinking?
What a combination.
What a combo.
So if you don't know, I have 2 G.I. Joe shirts, and one is Snake Eyes and one is Storm Shadow. Both ninjas, one more of a commando. In fact, it says commando on the front, which is weird because it should say Snake Eyes.
Right.
But if you remember when that came out, I've got sorry, someone's emailing me. They want me to pay money. not emailing, but texting me. And you know how like when you tell people, yeah, I can do such and such between this time and that time, but not after this time. People don't tend to listen to that.
Yeah. Or like when you tell someone, hey, we're going to do our podcast at this time, and then they show up late.
1 minute late. 1 minute.
I'm messing with you.
No, I'm teasing.
You're 4 days late. Come on.
I am 4 days late. That's true. So what was I talking about?
I don't know.
I got interrupted.
Pants, venturing out.
Yeah.
Snake Eyes, Commando.
Oh, yeah. But on the original thing, it did say Commando underneath his name.
Oh,
so I get it. Yeah, it'd say Commando because we didn't know what he was. You know, he's going to be. In fact, for that matter, I didn't even know what a commando was when I first got him. I was just like, that guy with the cool black thing. And when he came out with the wolf, what? Had like a little gray plastic wolf.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Was it like his dog?
Yeah, it was like his little wolf. He came at one stage, and I can't remember. I think that was like second edition came out. I don't think the first edition he had the wolf. But when he came out with the wolf, it was pretty cool. And he had a backpack with samurai swords in it. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Pretty cool. And an Uzi.
Really?
Yeah, he came.
I didn't know he used a gun. I thought he always used his swords.
No, he primarily used an Uzi, but he used the sword and the knife when he needed it. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Because he's a commando, you know?
Uzis are horrible guns, by the way.
Are they?
I'd like 2.
I just know that you can hold one in each hand, like on The Sound of Music, and spin around with them. You know, like she does out in the field. And shoot
that
like
is such a great deep fake.
The hills are alive with the sound of Uzis. So, funny story about that movie. Andrea tricked me into watching that. You know that, right? Like, I hate musicals with a passion. I cannot stand musicals. So Andrea goes, oh, no, you have to watch it. It's like the best. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, Saving Private Ryan was my favorite film. So she's like, it's a World War II film. And Peyton, there's Nazis in it, and they're shooting and everything. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't like Nazis, but you know, I like World War II. So she's like, no, it's a World War II period musical. You need to watch it. I'm watching this movie. The last, like, literally 120 seconds, the Nazis storm their house. They run out through the back garden. The movie ends with the Nazi firing a gun into the darkness as they get away. And then like this writing, you know, the Von Trapp family would later go on, you know, like they get away. That's the end of the movie. That was it. There was no World War II fighting at all in that movie.
You were disappointed?
Oh my gosh, dude. I was like, you tricked me. So I got her back.
How'd you get her back?
So there was this really cool movie back in the 90s called Rapa Nui. Did you ever see that thing?
I don't think so.
So it's this rad movie about Easter Island. And it's kind of like explains the legend of Easter Island. So there's this guy. It's all like, it's kind of like, it's almost like Ultimate Ninja Warrior because he has to do all these incredible feats in order to set his girlfriend, his lover, his wife to be free. So I told her, oh, you got to watch Rapa Nui. And she's like, no, I don't want to watch that. And I'm like, oh, no, you got to watch it. It's the best. I love that movie. And it's totally cheesy, but it's just this like Easter Island native dude just jamming around like with his knife and jumping on things. And so it was before parkour was cool. And I told her, oh, it's a romance. It's a love story. You got to watch it. So in the very beginning of the film, it shows their love story for all of like a minute or two, establishes that they love each other. Then these people come to the village and lock her up, put her in this cage in this deep, dark hole for the entire movie. But he's doing it for love. So he goes and does all of his adventure action things. And then at the end, they bring her up out of the hole. And she was like, what are you talking about? This is not a romance movie. And I'm like, I gotcha.
Dude,
that's for Sound of Music.
I understand completely because in 1999, a movie came out. Now, you need to understand, this is about 6 months before Jamie and I got married. And our entire relationship was based on the fact that we went to movies every weekend. Friday night, Saturday night, we're at the movies. And we'd reached the point where it used to be when we first started dating, right? Okay, you pick one this week. I got next week. You do this week. And then it reached the point where it was like, no, I can't do that movie. There's no way I can do that movie. Right. Because after, a while when you've been dating, you're like, all right, I got limits. So I wanted to see this movie, and I might have even seen it once already. You might have heard of it, called The Matrix.
Oh, I have heard of that.
And she goes, I'm not going to see that. And I go, it's a love story. Because you know how Trinity and Neo come together at the very end. Neo, you have to be the one because she told me I would fall in love with you. And I'm like, love story right there. She was so pissed after that movie. We almost broke up. I wouldn't be married to her today because of that movie.
Serious?
Yeah.
It was worth it though.
It really was.
Your kids wouldn't have existed, but The Matrix is a worthy cause.
Hey, you know what? I got to say, if you don't like The Matrix, there's something wrong with you.
You don't need that kind of negativity in your life.
People. That's right. Matrix 4 is coming out. I know.
Hey, see? That's why we're friends. Except I'll probably like it if it's terrible and you'll hate it. And then we'll talk about how we differ on films because I like that new Blade Runner. I didn't think it was anywhere near as good as the first one, but I was like, hey, more Blade Runner? Good.
Yeah.
But I did not appreciate Matrix 2 and 3 very much. I like 2 a little bit. 3, I was like, okay, yeah, you guys lost the plot. This is nowhere near as cool as 1.
Yeah, no, I loved 2 and 3.
You did, see? Maybe I got to go back and watch them again.
Whatever they call those machines that were like from Alien, and they were, shooting all the Sentinels.
Yeah,
those were just
cool.
Awesome. Yeah. The whole CGI in the tail end of that movie was just off the charts great.
Yeah.
I love it.
Those were cool. I admit those were cool. I just, You
never really know a man until you fight him.
See, I've only seen 2 maybe twice and 3 once. And I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm done. But Matrix 1, I could not. I was early in the Matrix 1. I saw it because there was nothing else good in the theater. So I went and saw it. And I was like, I hadn't heard a word. I think I'd saw it opening weekend. It was a sleeper hit. I'm like, what in the heck just happened to me? Me and my buddy looked at each other like, that was amazing. And then I start telling people, and I go to this thing like a million times, and then I go to Wales, and movies come out later there. At least they used to come out later there. So I go to Wales. It hits the theater after I moved there, brand new. And I tell my friends at church, you got to go see it. One of my buddies got unbelievably into it. And then I felt bad, like I corrupted him and caused idols in his life. Everything was Matrix, And I was like, yeah, I kind of broke that guy. But it was, yeah, I knew a secret.
He was too weak. That was his problem.
See, I don't even know what these quotes are.
Dude, I'm just telling you, that those were I saw Matrix 3, I think 3 times the day it came out. I was a financial planner at the time, and I went to the movies early in the morning, went on some appointments, went again in the afternoon, did another appointment, went again that night, because I was like, I got to see it again. What happened? I got to see it again. Love those movies.
Dude, that one scene, and I remember one day, because I love the movie. The whole movie, the first one is just art. It's just super good. There's nothing bad about the first one. Not a single thing wrong with that movie. All of it is good. And I remember at one point this scene, and keep in mind, I'm not a gun guy, I didn't own a gun, I just literally that scene where he comes through the metal detector and drops the 2 bags. I remember thinking about that going, it was just randomly hit me like, how cool is that? And I literally pulled out my DVD, and I'm not even kidding you. I watched that segment like 10 times where he's running up on the walls. But that scene, for some reason, because that all was pre 9/11.
Yeah.
And so I think it hit me after 9/11, because the perspective changed. And then I went back and watched it, and I'm like, dude, just where he drops those duffel bags. And the guy's like, what in the heck? This is not what he said. Like I said, I watched it 10 times. I have it all memorized, but that was rad.
Yeah. Yeah. Good movies.
And then that
I'd watch
song,
them all again right now.
by the Propeller Heads. So it's a good song.
Yeah.
So good. That soundtrack was rad too.
Yeah.
Everything about that movie is good. By the way, Deftones did they did the My Own Summer, Shove It, which is the name of that track, and that's in The Matrix. So
nice.
Yeah, I think that's what he's listening to in the very beginning. It's my favorite band, everybody. So don't go out and buy Deftones music, being like, oh, I want to go check them out now. You'll hate them. Most people I try to turn on the Deftones can't stand them. So
He's Starting to Believe. Oh, love that movie.
Yes.
Lawrence Fishburne can never do anything as great as The Matrix ever again.
He peaked.
He did.
He peaked in The Matrix.
Keanu Reeves still went on to do John Wick, but I'm telling you, Lawrence Fishburne.
Okay, are those good?
The first one is. The first one's great.
Yeah.
The second one and third and what is it, fourth now, whatever it is, they just gun movies. So I enjoy them.
Yeah, I saw where he's like riding a horse somewhere shooting people as he's riding a horse.
I don't remember, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway. Should we get into the topic?
We probably should.
Wait, I got a question for you though. What if I've got all of my sermons and I need to put them online, but I don't want to send people to like YouTube and Spotify and everywhere? How do I keep them all in one spot, Mr. Jones?
Sermon Boss. Sermon Boss Pete is where it's this thing.
It's a good thing I brought it up because you would have forgotten, huh?
It does this thing that like helps you with like your stuff on your thing. When you're doing your thing on Sunday and you're like, I want other people to see my thing, then where can I put my stuff? And then they that didn't sound right.
No, it didn't.
I saw your face. Okay. No. Sermon Boss is a tool that helps you keep all of your content, your podcast, your sermons as a content producer all in one place. So you contact sermonboss.com and you have them put a plugin on your site that will help you to keep everybody on your webpage. So instead of sending them off onto YouTube, you keep them right there and you can keep them consuming your content on your site. Sermonboss.com, it does what everybody else wishes their site did, and that's keep the traffic there. So if you want to have people watch a sermon about discipleship and immediately channel them into a discipleship tool that's also on your site, that's the way to do it. So one stop, one shop, sermonboss.com. See, I should write their commercial.
I'm telling you.
I made that little slogan up just on the spot right there.
Well,
one shop, one stop, sermonboss.com. All right.
You're basically a marketer.
I was thinking that, Pete. Like, I bet Pete's learning right now. That's what I was thinking.
I was taking notes. Mentally.
All right. So all that aside.
Great, Scott. It's time for this week's topic.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty. I was a little slow there. Sorry.
Afternoon podcast. What can I say?
That is what it is. The coffee's wearing off. The exposure to kryptonite is accumulated. I'm starting to lose my Superman strength. I no longer have X-ray vision, which I enjoy, Pete, when we're doing this podcast. That makes you uncomfortable, doesn't it?
There's a lot of things that make me uncomfortable about you.
All right. I do want to say the best thing ever that comes out of this podcast, these are my favorite comments. And we used to get these back in the early days where people are like, I was drinking my coffee and I spat it out in my car. Those were the best. Knowing that we had ruined the interior of someone's car on their way to work. We were hoping you carpooled. That would have been rad. But anyways, hey, so we're going to talk about escaping burnout. So guys, over the last few weeks, I've been really honest about just kind of where I've been at. Pete and I will be taking a couple weeks break. I'll be on vacation. Pete will be at summer camp tormenting children. And you can still check in. We'll have a little something for you. But that said, we wanted to let you know that I'm doing okay. Peyton's okay. The kids are fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine here. Like Han Solo says right before he shoots the intercom.
How are you doing?
Yeah. How are you doing? I think the best book title ever would be I'm Fine. We're All Fine. Everything's fine. I think that would make a great book title for a book on burnout. But today we're going to talk because for me,
and then you should put under there the subtitle, A Book on Burnout.
Pretty much.
Because if you don't, to me, it's like Church Zero. What does that mean? I don't understand.
I was talking all about that with Andrea this morning. I was listening to an audiobook about Lenny Kravitz and how he had to fight to get the right mix on his first album because he mixed it completely wrong. So I was talking about fighting companies and publishers, and for him it was record labels. But
right.
But anyways, all that to say, I'm doing better. You know, there are things. This is not my first rodeo. I am a I would say, highly motivated. I do a lot of different things. I would say I'm a jack of all trades. I don't do any one thing particularly well. I kind of throw myself into way too many things all at once, like podcasting, Pete, writing books, planting churches, writing training. The list could go on, where I probably at times just need to slow down and focus. But I'm also building my own house right now, raising kids, one with special needs. Like at one point, sanity kicks in and you say, maybe I don't do all these things all at one time. So that's never been easy for me. I've always been the guy that overestimates my own abilities and underestimates the challenges and difficulties ahead. But that said, I have learned what to do, how to cut and run when I need to, how to chop certain things off, how to slow other things down. Like Kenny Rogers said, you got to know when to hold them, when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And Pete's favorite part of that song is, go on, Pete.
I didn't even know there was anything after you need to know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
You never count your money when you're sitting at the table. Yeah, there's no future for me in country music. I think we can all agree. But there is a future for me without experiencing burnout, on a regular basis. And there are certain ways that I do that. So I want to talk a little bit today. And Pete, I'd like to get your input on this because you definitely, I'm sure, have some things to share about this.
Okay.
So how to because so much of it, like you could subtitle this topic like how to minister in the face of chaos, right? Which is always, I don't think you ever feel like you're not ministering in the face of chaos. But the first thing that I would do to avoid burnout is to pray. When I start hitting burnout, I get an early warning system. I will notice my health go down. I will start to have psychosomatic symptoms, which means your body acts out your stress. I will start to either get sick because stress lowers the immunity more than anything else. And I will start
raises the cortisol.
It does. And I start to get emotional. I get hormonal right before I get sick. So I have learned.
So have you been sick before every one of our podcasts?
Yes, those tears are a sign of pain and weakness.
I always knew you were hormonal. I just didn't know you would admit it.
Yeah, so I tend to get like emotional, like weepy, and when that happens, I'm like, okay, like you need to recognize your warning. Like if you're starting to raise your voice with your kids, you're starting to have a short fuse, cuss words are starting to leak out. That's the pressure cooker. The pepper pot's boiling over, as they used to say in the 1920s. So you remember that?
No.
But you basically, you'll start to recognize the warnings. And I like Carey Nieuwhof's book, which was called Didn't See It Coming, because that's his book on burnout. And it's a really fantastic book. But it's called Didn't See It Coming because that's the first step, is recognizing the warning signs. What he says is like heading into burnout is like driving through the fog over a cliff, right? You don't realize you're getting burnout until you're falling off the cliff. And so what he does is he says, look, there are some signs like warnings on an odometer, or on a dashboard. There are things like engine lights that go off or things. And I quote him in church plantology, cha-ching, I had to do that. So the first thing is recognize the warning signs. Start taking stock when you're getting burnt out of what your early warning systems are. Like I said, mine is getting weepy, losing energy. I start losing the ability to focus. I lose energy. I start to get sick and I start to get weepy. And when I get weepy and unreasonable, it either comes out in cranky irritability with my wife, and she'll just be like, okay, whatever, cranky boots or whatever. And I'll be like, look, I recognize it now. Back in the olden days, I used to make it worse by trying to justify my behavior. Now I'm like, I'm a jerk. I'm sorry. I'm obviously going through something. I'll own it and embrace it. And quickly, I don't want to alienate her when she is my greatest support and stress. So that's maybe a little tidbit there is, if you're tending to take it out, quickly backtrack that. Here's the thing I've noticed about wives. Women like a strong man, no doubt, I'm sure. They like us to be strong and manly and yada, yada. At least mine does. So if you're not a manly man, your wife doesn't like you, I'm sorry about that. You can say I'm a toxic
Okay,
male.
I have to share this story. Do you remember the show Coach?
Let me finish. Okay.
You remember the show Coach?
Yeah.
And you remember how, the coach he was like a man's man. And then his daughter dated the guy who was like this wuss. And he's the boyfriend's talking to the dad. And he's like, well, I always felt like a woman is 51% female and 49% male. And a man is 51% male and 49% female. And he just goes, really? I always saw myself in the high 90s.
That's rad. Well, so here's the thing, right? The way I was raised is you're tough and you don't show, you're like, I'm Karate Man, and Karate Man don't bruise on the outside. He bruise on the inside. You keep all that in. And I would say, surprisingly, to many of you, you would not know this, I don't think, because I podcast and talk a bunch of crap, but I'm actually more private than probably many of you would realize. There's a reason I don't post. I almost turned my video on because I'm like, this is my office. I don't want you guys to see it's just weird. I have this weird thing sometimes where I'm like, that scene in Private Ryan where Tom Hanks says, what's the memory of your wife? And he goes, no, that one's just for me, right? There's certain things.
Which movie?
Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, I don't remember that scene.
Yeah, there's a scene where he's telling him you have certain things you think about, and those things, he says, I remember there's two things I think about with my wife, and one where she's in the garden and she's tending her flowers and I can't wait to get in. I think about that through difficult times. And then he goes, what's the other one? He goes, no, that one's just for me. And I think there's always this sense in which we have private and public parts. I need, that sounded wrong.
I know it did, but I was letting it slide.
I'm not trying to do this today, and you're behaving so well. But, there are certain things where I have, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I have certain things that I kind of keep to myself that are private. I don't know why I'm going off the reservation talking about that, but where I was coming to was with my wife. I was raised you don't show that weakness, even when I mention on the podcast, because I think I'm fairly authentic. I don't ever try to fake stuff, but I may not always. It's like it says in Proverbs. I may not always share everything. Like Proverbs says, a fool speaks all that's in his heart. So I have certain rooms that are that's you're in the living room, but you're not in the bedroom. You're not in the study. You're not further back in the house. That's stuff that's between me and God. But because I was raised that you don't share your weaknesses, yada, yada. That was something that I've learned from Jesus. That's something I've learned from being a Christian, which is a confessional religion where, you are meant to, being weak means being strong, according to Paul. So, but what I learned, and I had to learn this with my wife, was I had to learn early on, she needs to see my weaknesses too. I will present even to her like I've always got it all together. And so but in the times where I started to crumble and like, there's times where like when my dad died, I became an absolute basket case. In those moments, my wife just waxes strong. Like, she becomes a superhuman. I feel like when I go through huge tragedy, I re-fall in love with my wife all over again. She becomes this amazing person. And it a couple times now, it's made me appreciate her so much because she's just there for me. And I found anytime I share weakness, in times where maybe I'm going 100 miles an hour, and where that used to cause tension, if I can acknowledge it up front early on, I've got too much on my plate, or I'm doing too much, or I'm burning myself out. Rather than being someone who is in competition with anything going on in my life, my wife immediately is there. Like, I don't know, everybody's relationship with their spouse is different. But with ministry, you're always giving out to other people nonstop. You're always investing in others. And where the tension can come is if you're not doing that with your family. And if you're not investing in your family, if you're not discipling your family, if you're not pouring into your family, they will start to resent you and resent the ministry. Sometimes they resent God. This is why I have no desire to be a superstar. This is why, like most of my life, I want my life to be private. I want to be a private person that occasionally lets out some public things. I don't want to be a big public figure who struggles to have a private life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I've made a choice. Like, there are certain things I have done in my life. Like, I do this podcast, but Pete and I don't try to, like, that's intentional. I'm not trying to go be big and famous. When I was at Exponential, if I wanted to have a bigger platform than I have right now, I would have stayed at Exponential. My platform was growing all the time, but that's not.
I have noticed our podcast numbers going down since you left Exponential.
Well, these things are inevitable. But, the funny thing, Pete, this is the main thing that I want to start. I'm actually not gotten to my first point. I kind of have, but I haven't. The first thing is to pray when you're heading into burnout. In the book Atomic Habits, the guy says that any habit that you want to start that takes longer than 2 minutes probably won't become consistent. When you're trying to start a habit, you have to start a habit for 2 minutes or less and just do it every day for 2 minutes. So that's a quick check-in with God for 2 minutes. I know that sounds terribly unholy to you as ministers, but let's be real. That's how the brain works. If you haven't started that habit and you're struggling to pray, 2 minutes every day. When you start doing that, it will grow. Once it lodges in your brain, you won't miss those 2 minutes and it will grow. That's how habits work. So what I would say is when you're in burnout, you check in for those 2 minutes, man, even if that's all you can take, and you maintain that habit. Because a lot of times what's happened is we've lost our grounding when we're heading towards burnout. We're not getting the comfort. I believe in the supernatural aspect of the ministry. I believe that there is the peace of God that passes understanding. I believe that there is a sense of worship that takes our focus off the wrong things. I believe that it alleviates stress. There are documented studies that show that prayer releases stress, right? Like in order to the point where you live longer as a praying person. Stress is the number one killer of Americans, right? It psychosomatically leads to heart disease, yada, yada. Stress is a significant factor for those things. So what I would say is you pray. I go back to that time where David, it says at the Tower of Ziklag, when all of their children are taken, their wives and children are stolen by the Philistines. And it says, but David stood, they all picked up stones to stone him. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So point one was kind of know yourself, know your early warning signs. Part two is pray, strengthening yourself in the Lord your God. Let him strengthen you. Think of all the places in the scripture where David's just like you. He's saying, you are my rock. Did I go away?
You did, but you're back. You are my rock. That was the last
Think
thing.
of all the places where, David says, you are my rock. He's not waxing theological there. He's literally saying, you are my rock because I am unstable right now, but you are stable. And so when you read those through like a mirror reading, you begin to get that everything that David isn't, God is. And he's coming to God as a wreck. He's a king. He's a general. He's got all these moving pieces. He's building an empire, a kingdom, and he's not doing okay at times. And he's coming to God. And so anyways, that's one. Third thing is beware of substance. I have to say this as a psych nurse. Beware of substance, because you're never more tempted to rely on substance as when you're approaching burnout. And substance will hasten. It feels like it's helping. It will hasten your burnout. It will, it's a coping mechanism that actually doesn't allow you to cope. It's a replacement for coping. Alcohol is not, drugs, whatever it is, pot, whatever, is not actually coping. It is a substitution coping mechanism, but it's not actually coping with anything. So what you'll find with those things is you will, and it will weaken you. It will weaken your strength, your resolve, your resilience. Every drink you take during those times it's just a downward spiral. So you have to, during the times you recognize burnout, start evaluating your consumption of alcohol or any substance. Hopefully you're not taking pot. I mean, I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't care if the government says it's legal. If you're smoking pot and you're not dying of cancer, or, it's not some medical thing legitimately, because I am an advocate for what I've seen as an RN in the hospital for people suffering certain conditions, that marijuana was just the go-to for people dying in hospice and other things like that. But if you're just doing that because you think it's cool and fun and whatever, you're a moron. I'm just going to say it. You're an idiot. It's the biggest gateway drug known to man. And I'm telling you this as a guy that worked in drug rehab. You're just buying it hook, line, and sinker. And check in with me 5-10 years, and we'll talk if you're still here, because you're not just going to be on pot anymore. It's gonna, your life is not. There are two paths you can go by, as Led Zeppelin saying. And if we looked at your life 10 years from now on pot versus without pot, there'd be a significant difference in your life, ministry, and legacy. And you can quote me on that. We'll talk about it in heaven when you see I'm right. I don't have strong feelings about this, Pete. I can't stand drugs. I can't stand pot, because I just, you know me and drugs. I hate, if drugs were a person, I would kick it in the nuts and I'd punch it in the face, because I just have lost too many people due to that. But you got to watch substance. So sorry, I got a little salty there. Recreation. So there's a balance that needs to happen, and I know we're coming up to the end here. There's a balance that needs to happen. When you're starting to hit burnout, you have to be able to cut and run. You have to be able to cut. Kind of like I love, for some reason, Jonah and the whale comes to mind, where as the tempest starts up, they're like, what do we need to throw overboard, right? Now, obviously, they're not thinking Jonah, but you kind of got two choices when you're hitting. You either throw everything else overboard, or you get thrown overboard, right? Because when you have too many obligations coming up, you need to be able to look at them honestly and say, something needs to give, something needs to go. So there's this dance you need to start doing, which is, how do I reduce my obligations? And here's the other thing. How do I increase my recreations? Now, it goes against everything that we think of in the world of American life ideals, pursuit of life, liberty, and we used to be, at least, a people with a strong work ethic. But the reality is where we're at right now is, when I say recreation, I'm using a Hebrew understanding of recreation. Recreation means sleep. It means rest. It means time with family. It could mean playing Fortnite, playing a video game, going out and playing a sport, keeping a regular soccer night, where you're on a team or something, going and blowing off steam in the gym. It doesn't matter to me. But recreation means it's the opposite of obligation. It's something you don't have to do. It's something you want to do. So suddenly what you've got to do during that crisis period is starting to decrease obligations and increase recreations. Because what happens when you're approaching burnout is you've done the opposite. You've increased your obligations, you decrease your recreations. You now can't do the things you want to do. It's all your have tos. So in that sense, I would say that you've got to try to claw back to just cut. And I don't care if you're on a leadership team. We talk about this. I can never mention this, that when you're on a leadership team, you cannot be the only leader. You need to have a leadership team in place, so that you can immediately look at your team and say, hey, I need to cut out for a few months. Being able to just end and say, I need a sabbatical. I need a few months off. I've said to Andrew recently, I need a sabbatical. And I have a full-time job. And I've talked about, should I just have New Breed? Just go to my team and say, hey, I need a sabbatical. It's been over 10 years now, and I've not had one. And I've done all this stupid crap over the last 10 years. And I used to have a sabbatical, on a regular, but not like every couple years, but like, probably every 7 years, roughly. I would take a break, and it might only be a couple months where I would just go, of course I was usually moving, there were things like that at play, but somehow you got to find the way to get a sabbatical. And a sabbatical to you might not be leaving your job. Like, I don't have that luxury right now. I'm sure you don't have that luxury, but at some point you've got to get out of the game. Now, if you think, oh man, that doesn't sound biblical. If you pick up church plantology, cha-ching, I talk about the fact that Paul is burnt out on his second missionary journey, and he just goes and works with his hands, while Timothy and Silas continue to tear it up in Berea and Thessalonica and, Lystra and Derbe, all the places he left. He keeps having to leave them behind. And while they raise up leaders and finish the work he could do, because he keeps getting driven out of these cities. Well, when he heads over there, when he finally gets to Corinth, he arrives broken. I mean, he just burnt out. And I make an argument for that. So does N.T. Wright, that I use heavily in that chapter, cha-ching. But he just goes and works with his hands for months because he's burnt. He's worn out. And so a sabbatical for you might just mean for a few months, I'm not doing any ministry. Then when Timothy and Silas get there, it says that then Paul begins to preach the gospel in Corinth. So when he first gets there, he's just working with his hands, busted up, healing. He's physically busted up from being stoned to death, beaten numerous times. He was worn out, and mentally he was harried and frazzled, because he would only start ministering in one town, and the circumcision group would come, find him, beat him, stone him, and then he'd have to escape to the next town. So there's a strong argument to be made that a sabbatical will save your brain and prolong your ministry. So these are the things that I do, and they have helped serve me. Losing yourself in a video game, walking, exercising, eating right. I mean, that's one I didn't mention. That is a huge factor.
I was so thinking that when you were talking, I was like, yeah, exercise. You need to exercise. Those release of the endorphins. And of course, most
absolutely
don't. And I lived most of my life not exercising. So I'm not like speaking as someone who did that for years. But
well, and that
huge.
is probably my saving grace right now, Pete, as I'm exercising. I'm doing Shanti for an hour a day, and it's kicking the crap out of me. And I'm starting to get back in shape. Like my textbook body's disappearing, you know.
Is that what you call it?
Textbook body? Textbook body. Yeah, it's the fattest I've been. So, but that's it, man. So hopefully you guys, you know, but by the way, one size does not fit all. Each one of you, like what Pete just said about health, that is one that like, that's never going to change. That's how God's made your brain. Praying, that's not going to change. Knowing yourself, that's not going to change. Beware of substance, that's not going to change. Recreation and obligations, that's not going to, these are all things that are just, that's just the way it works. But what is one man's castaway is another man's treasure. So there can't be a prescription for you. What this looks like for you will be completely different. Like if I got rid of all my obligations, I think I would head into a deeper depression and burnout. I need something at all times to kind of keep me going. I can't just sit around and do nothing. That would depress me and burn me out faster than anything. Is because how I'm wired, you know?
Right.
So, but that's it. Well, hey, Pete, with all these things, all this fight and burnout and, you know, praying and how do you make sure that you see, you know, because the last thing you want to do during that time, Pete, is do your finances and, you know, tax compliancy. What do you do?
You know, I'm so grateful that you've asked me, Peyton, because I get to share a company that's close to my heart, a company that means a lot to me. SimplifyChurch.com. SimplifyChurch.com, they take care of all of those things that no one really wants to do. In fact, some might say they're for the non-math pastor.
You know, Pete, it makes sense to me now why you named your third child Simplify Church Mitchell.
What are they working on today?
Yeah, it's the electricians. They're cutting into drywall, which I wish they weren't, but they are.
In other words, there was a mistake made.
Mistakes were made.
And stress. Great. Love it.
Yes, but at this point, I'm like, you know, cutting drywall again, are we? All right. That's fine. So, but, well, guys, thanks for joining us. Oh, head to simplifychurch.com. There we go. I stitched that up nicely with a little bow. Guys, thanks for joining us today. This has been Peyton Jones and Pete Mitchell, who never gets to talk, reminding you that if you want to reach ones nobody's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planner Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planner Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplannerpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplannermagazine.com.